Today the race highlight will be Goblins. And let's get started. Goblins. What are some of the units that are Goblins? There are 6 Goblins in total. As you can see, we're very fortunate to finding a lot of Goblins in this game. The Goblins are Bounty Hunter, Clockwork, Tinker, Timber, Alchemist, and Techies. 3 of the Goblins are 1 cost. Timber is 2 cost, while Alchemist is 4 cost, and Techies is 5 cost. Let's get into the race synergy for Goblins. Goblins have 2 synergies. One is at 3 Goblins and one is at 6 Goblins. With 3 Goblins, you have 1 random unit receiving a nanobot buff. And let's have a look here with what is a nanobot buff. So a nanobot buff is a random buff that's given to a unit that adds 15 armor and 10 health regeneration per second. And it will be appearing over here on the screen as this form. Because it's randomly chosen, it's hard for any player to know which unit will be chosen for the buff. And yes, the defending team and offending team will be randomly chosen for the buff as well. So here I have the Bounty Hunter with the buff, and on the offensive team, it will be randomly chosen as a unit on my team. And it doesn't have to be Goblins as well. Now what happens when we have 6 Goblins? When we have 6 Goblins, guys, something magical happens. When you have 6 Goblins, every unit on your board will have the Goblin buff. And that means every unit will have 15 armor and 10 health regeneration. So, this game is something of a highlight. Looking here, at round 4, without rolling, we got Tinker, Clockwork, and Bounty Hunter to 2-star. This is an extremely good opening for Goblins, and that's something I will be touching on as well. Let's look at the race and stages. What do I mean by race and stages? Is what happened in the early game, mid game, and late game for a particular race that's under the highlight. Today we're looking at Goblins. Goblins are really strong in the early game, and having 2-star Goblins around 4 means I'm incredibly strong. So what this really pushes us into is a strong early game that punishes a lot of players that goes a greedy lineup, that goes for draw, that goes for hunters, or goes for mages, or something that's more into the mid game, or someone's looking for trolls. So having a great early game, we just need 3 Goblins, and 3 Goblins will activate the nanobot buff. So how is Goblins in the mid game? Turns out something that's so strong and so powerful in the early game is not that good in the mid game, simply because Goblins falls off. If you can get those Goblins to 3-star at round 4 or round 5, there's no reason they should be still very relevant at round 15 or round 16 and onwards. So that's why Goblins do fall off. And how are Goblins in the late game? Well, there are 2 scenarios, my friend. In the late game, Goblins either do really well or do not so well. This all depends if they find the crucial unit. The win condition is Techies. If they find Techies, they activate the nanobot buff for all the Goblins and all the units on the field, regardless if they're Goblins or they're random units. So that's really strong. That means Goblins is actually top tier in the late game if you manage to find your Techies and have the 6 Goblins. But if you do not, then the only way for Goblin to stay relevant is to have some of the 3-star Goblins instead of 2 stars. Now let's look at some of the counters to Goblins. So what are the counters to Goblins? In the early game, there's almost no counters. It's very rare for Goblins to lose in the early game simply because of the nanobot buff, and also a few of the Goblins like Tinkers and Clockwork being mercs. Being mercs, they regenerate health per second, which is at 15 health per second when you have 2 mercs. And that additional with a random nanobot buff means there's almost no counter for the round from 4 to 10. But afterwards, we start to face a few counters. And as we transition into the mid game, a lot of the counters do arise. And here we're going to list some of the main counters for Goblins. Goblins are really weak against 6 elves, 4 beasts, demons with a Terrorblade that's 2-star, and with a bunch of demons like Shadow Thing and Queen of Pain that's great AoE damage, against 3 mages and more mages, against trolls when they have the full troll lineup, against knights, and against elementals. So one thing I want to touch on with elementals is elemental is one of the strongest counters for Goblins around round 10 to round 15. Simply having 2 elementals and maybe a 2-star Tiny or 2-star Razer can really counter all the melee units of the Goblins. So as you can see, most of the Goblins are melee. Clockwork is melee, Timber is melee, and Bounty Hunter is melee. when melee units are hitting the enemy, what's going to happen is it's likely they get stunned by the elemental buff, and that's something as a Goblin players I tend to discover. Most of the other counters I mentioned earlier, you will start counter Goblins after round 16, and that's when Goblins really do fall off. And yeah, for those that have noticed, Butterbutt here is actually half full here, so we're actually playing with half full in this game. When you look at the possible transitions with the Goblins, we mentioned how weak Goblins are in the mid game, and if we don't touch on the mid game, we'll never survive to the late game. So let's look at what are the transitional things we can bring onto a field, because we only need technically 3 Goblins. We don't even need four Goblins to make things work. So with 3 Goblins, what we really want as a traditional possibility is 3 to 6 mages, 3 to 6 assassins, 3 dragons maybe, 4 trolls even, maybe 2 nagas being the Tide and Medusa. This is more of a late game transition. 3 warlocks, because we include Alchemist, we can have 2 more warlock, one being Shadowfiend, one can be a necromancer, or one can be an enigma. And if you really want warlocks, a 2-star venomancer can do some magic as well. There are also 2 undead in combination of the warlocks. So first we can go into Abaddon and Necro, then we can go with the Necro, Alchemist and Shadowfiend transition into the undead and warlocks. Of course, let's not forget about the transition in the mid game with Anti-Mage and Terrorblade. I'm sure you might have seen my game with BSJ where we had a 3-star Terrorblade that was the powerhouse for Goblins in the mid game. And Terrorblade at 2-star is very relevant. Terrorblade before round 20 is actually a unit that's so strong, and unless there's an anti-mage counter him, he is unstoppable. And also the last transition for Goblins in the mid game is actually Beast. Goblins really do enjoy Lone Druid at 2-star, and Goblins combine Lone Druid with maybe a 3-star Enchantress or maybe a 2-star Lycan to get a little bit of more relevance in the mid game. Let's look at the next part, guys, and this will be the key transitional units. What do I mean by the key transitional units? I just mentioned about the possible transitions, and those few units are very key to Goblins at certain stages of the game. In the early stage for Goblins, you want to see Anti-Mage personally for myself. You want to see Anti-Mage, Beastmaster, and Queen of Pain. I tend to keep those 3 units at the very early stage of the game for being cheap and easy to find pairs and likely to find a 2-star. And once we transition somewhat into the mid game, we want to see again Beastmaster, Queen of Pain. On top of that, we want to see Terrorblade, Shadowfiend, and Razer. So Terrorblade, Shadowfiend, and Razer are some of the top tier 3-star units for me, simply because they provide so much AoE or so much single target damage. And after that, what we're looking for in the purple unit range is Lone Druid, Doom, and Conquer. Each unit have the uniqueness, and Lone Druid summons the bear at a 2-star. Lone Druid is incredible. And at 1-star, a Conquer and Doom can be magical as well. The Doom can doom one of the very strong unit of the enemy, really good II, and Conquer both, we all know how great Conquer is. And also the last hidden hero for Goblins is also a Disruptor. We keep Beastmaster for one of the reasons is that he'll become more relevant to buff the Disruptor if we find a 2-star Disruptor. And Disruptor will be key for the Goblins to counter mages and lineups that tend to ball in a corner, because most Goblins are melee, and if you also have Terrorblade and other melee units, you tend to have trouble to find units in a corner. So having the Disruptor can really get his spells off early and get a storm onto them before you run into all the mages or all the trolls. Now let's look at something that's not touched often on Goblins. It's how do you prioritize items. So prioritizing items can be very unique. What I usually do is I tend to give tanky items to my front lines. Usually that will be Timbersaw. So Timbersaw is much tankier than Clockwork because it gains mana each time he level up from 1-star to 2-star and from 2-star to 3-star. But on the off chance, if I plan to get my Clockwork to 3-star, like we plan to get him to 3-star, we will give Clockwork a lot of the tanky items like the Stout Shield, like the armor, like Rings of Regen. But keep in mind, sometimes you might want to keep the Rings of Regen for a Perseverance, which can later be made into a Refresher. And what about the damage items, you might ask? So there's 2 things about the damage items. One is like, let's decide how strong do we want to be in the early game. If we want to be the strongest, we'll give those items to my Bounty Hunter. And what that does is Bounty Hunter has a really low CD, and with any mana regen and damage item, he has the highest chance of gaining mana and doing more damage to the enemy. With his low CD and high damage single target nuke. There is a downside to it though. If you manage to get this Bounty Hunter to 3-star, and in the late game he's not that relevant, and you actually want those items to maybe on your Tide, on your Dusa, maybe on the Disruptor, or maybe on your Shadow Thing. So how do we adjust for that? Well, what I tend to do is I tend to look at my Bounty Hunter, I tend to save up for another 2-star Bounty Hunter. And then if the item on a Bounty Hunter is so good, say if it's a Press of Ferns, or if it's close to a Refresher, or if it's close to a Crystallis, or if it's close to a Maelstrom, I'll sell my first Bounty Hunter that's 2-star, and I'll put down the second Bounty Hunter, and I'll take those items back and give to another new unit, say a Medusa, say a Tide, say a Disruptor. Now, what about the late game item prioritization? So what I do with late game, guys, is I focus to give items on Gyrocopter, Lich, Medusa, Techies, and Tide for a few reasons. Usually I only give items on Lich if he's 2-star. Lich is credible at 2-star, low CD, great damage in terms of the Chain Frost, and great disability to the enemy. And Gyro has one of the best attack speed and really wide range of nuke. For Techies, because Techies with any mana items and with any attack items can get his bomb off faster, and sometimes he can get 2 bombs off because he only has 10 seconds on the bomb. And we all know why we give items to Tide and Dusa over here. Now, let's look at some of the positional for the Goblins. What about early game, mid game, and late game for the Goblins? For the early game, there tend to be 3 particular positions, which I have mentioned before, and I'll attach a link to the guide for that one. They are the offensive, they are the side positioning, and they are the corner positioning. Let's have a look what do I mean by the offensive positioning. We'll look at the offensive positioning first, and when do we usually use that? We tend to use offensive position with Goblins where you have Timbersaw and things that does AoE damage behind in the backline. These tend to be a Queen of Pain, Shadow Thing, and a Razer. What this allows us to do is we know we're strong in the early game, we really want to get most of our spells onto all the enemies as much as we can because we know we're stronger. Let's have a look at the Queen of Pain positioning. The Queen of Pain is standing right behind the other Goblins, so this way she does, as assassin, she tends to jump to the backline, but in this particular one, what's going to happen is she's going to stay right over here, not for this round maybe, because they were actually in the corner. So let me actually show you guys one round that she actually, so let's have a look at this one. Okay, let's have a look at this one. The timestamp was not working. Okay. So what's going to happen over here, guys? The Queen of Pain is going to stand here as assassin. She's not going to jump forward. And in this offensive positioning, the Timber and Queen of Pain got most of their spells off on most of the enemies. This is what I mean by the offensive positioning. And it's great to capitalize on how strong you are with Goblins and how strong you are with Timbersaw and more AoE damage dealers like Queen of Pain, Razer, Shadow Thing, and even Beastmaster. Later on, you have Disruptors as well. Let's here, the side positioning allows us to have a focus fire or to have the most tanky unit on the outer skirt. So what that means is most units will be attacking this unit from the front and from the left, allowing those units to tank a little bit but not fully. And this also allows us squishy units like Shadow Thing and other units to be on the side that receive 1 or no instance of damage, allows us to flank enemies from one particular side. And here, because I'm looking around an enemy knowing that I'm stronger, and this really works well for a few particular certain units like Conquer, like Lone Druid. We don't need the Lone Druid to be here, Lone Druid can be here, but things like Conquer can be right here to have enough damage received to get his bolt off. This over here is the last positioning for Goblins in the early to mid game. This particular positioning is centered on a particular 2-star. Over here we have a particular 2-star as Shadow Thing. Usually it's Shadow Thing or Venomancer that I'll use this particular positioning. Looking over here, what this does, it protects the Shadow Thing in the corner that defend him against assassins, and this defensive position usually drag the enemy in. For a range unit like Shadow Thing and Venomancer, this allows us to focus on 1 or 2 units, gives us a little advantage, and really capitalizes on the strongest range unit we have, which is Shadow Thing over here. Let's have a look what happens when we fight a player. So notice how Shadow Fiend is fully protected. I only need 3 to protect him. I also have the Tinker right in front of him, so that Tinker is the last line of defense for the Shadow Fiend. And yes, looking over here, they're running in towards us. And by running in towards us, it really allows us to focus one unit down. The particular unit here was Anti-Mage. This allows us to get most of our AoEs onto the enemy as well. And I think I was showing the chat what are some of the range of units on the table. So now that we look at the positioning for the early game, we're not going to touch on the mid game for the positioning as detailed because we know usually Goblin lose in the mid game. The mid game will still use the 3 positionings: offensive, side, and corner positioning for a variety of units. If we have plenty of AoE, we take the offensive positioning. If we have enough focus fire, we take the side positioning. If we want to protect things like Shadow Fiend and Venomancer, we still take the defensive positioning. Notice the mid game usually ends for me around round 26 latest. This is one of the late game positioning for Goblins. I'm sure most of you have expected something similar. It's that we do spread out our Goblins, we do spread our units because we don't want to get caught by a massive storm. We don't want to get caught by Enigma. We really want to spread out so most of our units are not getting caught by everything together. And sometimes we're positioned over here, we're positioned for the Queen of Pain, sometimes we're positioned for something else. This is crucial because units can really make things work when you position them properly, but if you don't position them properly, they can really punish us. So say sometimes we never got the Doom off, sometimes we never got the Bears off, and sometimes we can't even get the Enigma off. I position the Enigma over here so he can be attacked and he can have a quick chance of casting his spells. But notice when I found the Tide, I swapped down the Clockwork, and the Tide is positioned right between 2 units. So this way Tide will be less likely to receive damage from the left and the right. He's likely to receive a frontal damage and the damage behind him if it's a range unit. Let's have a look. And yes, I'm spreading my assassins as well. And let's have a look after the dragon round. So let's have a look at this round. And notice how the Lone Druid positioned over there, so he have a chance of being attacked but not fully in the middle. So notice how Tide was protected by 2 units on the side, and because of that, let's see how low Tide got before he got his Ravage off. With 2 units protecting him on the side, he got his Ravage off at say 5% health. So imagine if we didn't have those 2 units next to him, he would have died. So I tend to have my Tide between 2 units, maybe my Disruptor between 2 units, and even my Conquer between 2 units when they're 1 star. When they're 2 star, I'll take the other units back and put them in the middle as a highlight and get them to get their spells off. So now we touched on to the late game positioning. What I'm going to be touching on is some of the specific tips for Goblins. Let's go into the first tip. This particular tip, we're going to be talking about rerolling and how does it help us and how sometimes it can be much of a gambling. So rerolling, what we mean by Goblins rerolling is we're rerolling at Goblins at level 3 sometimes, but sometimes and most of the time at level 4. So at level 4 we have the highest chance to find 1 star and 2 star. And notice most Goblins are 1 star, 2 star. What this allows us to do is collect a lot of 2 star Goblins. And sometimes if we're fortunate enough, we tend to collect a 3 star Goblins really early. And this really goes very well with the Goblin gambling strategy, but they take this even further. They're also running at level 5. There's a few reasons why I wouldn't recommend this, so let me explain. Firstly, rerolling at level 5 is great. You have a great chance of finding your 3 star Goblins, and that's what I did when I first started playing auto chess with Goblins. But there's a massive downside is you're delaying your economy. A big advantage in the early game and a massive disadvantage in the mid to late game. This is because we need the economy that we received early game to power boost us into the late game levels faster and find techies fast. But what happens when we start rolling at level 5 is that instead of saving while we're rolling for an important or much needed 3 star Goblin, we're actually delaying our saving. And that's going to delay us getting to 50 gold, and that's going to delay us getting to level 7, even level 6, level 7, level 8. And sometimes we want to be level 9 to be rolling on techies, which I'll touch on very soon. So by delaying our leveling progression, we're sacrificing the the gains of economies we gained from Goblins early game. And what we're trading off is we're trading off a chance of being strong in the mid game, but we also are losing the chance of finding techies in the late game very quickly. Because once we roll and we don't get the 3-star Goblins with the Goblin gambling strategies, we'll be very worse off and most likely will end up with the last 2 position. So this is something of a little tip for us, is that it's nice to be rolling for Goblins at level 4, but once you get to level 5, you really want to consider whether you want to roll or not. Let me show you guys. In this particular replay, I am rolling because I was pretty close to get some of my 3-star Goblins. In other cases, I wouldn't be rolling because I will be more conservative. It's really up to the bench I have and what win streaks I have and how strong I feel my board is. This is the second tip for Goblins. Over here, we're currently sitting on level 4. Yes, we do want to enjoy the higher rates of finding 1-star, 2-stars on level 4, but what I also want is to maintain my win streak. But if I want to maintain my win streak, and I also want to have the higher rates, I really have to find a balance. The balance over here is I'll level up in exchange of higher 3-star rates. Notice at level 6 we have higher 3-star rates. At level 5 we have high 3-star rates. So the exchange over here is, in order to keep my win streak over here, I didn't feel that I was strong enough by having those units, and at the same time I rolled once I got a Razer instead of matching any of my many pairs. I didn't want to gamble further. I want to take the safe route of just having extra Shadow Thing. But unfortunately we did find someone that's quite strong, and leveling up here was a little risky to us. And this was the Tinker before the Tinker buff. Yes, we did lose here, but notice how even though we lost, the money we spent at 5 gold to protect the win streak was still used for us to level up. And here again, we're faced with 2 choices. We can spend 5 gold to level up again, or what we can spend is we can stay low to find anti-mage, or maybe to find another unit. But what happened is we found anti-mage pair, we found the Shadow Flame pair. Knowing we found those 2 pair, we can consider to level up, but here I replace Ogre. So what that means is, yes, I'm switching to the defensive Shadow Flame positioning. So what I'm trying to say, guys, is that yes, we want to be rolling, that's the first tip, but you don't want to roll excessively, and you really want to adjust with your win streaks, with your lose streaks, and with how your unit synergy works. So if we're rolling, we're having too many 2-stars sitting on the bench, and you have full 2-stars there, maybe you should consider of leveling up once to protect your win streak. Maybe you only cost 5 or 10 gold to level up. Maybe we shouldn't be trying to get a 3-star Goblins, because that sometimes can be a massive trap. So always keep in mind of your win streak, guys. This next tip is going to be combined with 2 tips together. So in this particular game, what we're looking at is we're looking at a Goblin player, which is me myself, and I'm not in a terribly good position. This is round 22. I have 49%, and I have been losing consecutively for the past few rounds. In this particular tip, there are 2 things. One tip is that we do not want to be rolling for techies. Our win condition at level 8. We want to try to make it, so if we can make it, we want try to make it so we start rolling for techies at level 9 if possible. Why is that? This is because at level 9 it's 3 times more likely for us to find techies than level 8. What that also means is 2 gold spent at level 9 is like 6 gold spent rolling for techies at level 8. So, but you might ask, hey, but what if I'm up to die? Which I'll touch on very soon. So over here, it's about 2 things. One about discipline. The other thing is about HP judgment. So what do I mean by discipline? What do I mean by HP judgment? We really don't want to roll too hard because as a Goblin player, level 9 is where we want to be rolling. So most of the time, I'll try to only roll minimal. I always try to keep my gold on a higher multiples of 10, say 30, 40 gold, so I have the chance to level up when my HP falls even lower. The mid game and late game powerhouse is also hunters. Hunters are really great because most of us melees, and being in this defensive position, we can't hit most of the squishy ones while they can focus us down, being in the defensive position. And yes, I lost massively here. This is something I talk about in terms of discipline and game judgment. It's that I know next round is a neutral round, and round 25 is a very easy neutral round. And for that particular round, What I'm waiting for is to save enough gold with savings, and I'll be leveling up, preparing to level up to level 9. I want to be level 9 to be rolling my Goblin Techies instead of at level 8 if possible. There are certain conditions that I'll be rolling at level 8, which I'll touch on the next tip. So yeah, we're going to defeat the Harpies quite easily. And yes, here we'll be rolling. We got to level 9, we start to roll. And the idea is, I'm still at 30-ish%. I can afford to lose one more round, but what I really want is I really want to be at level 9. Being at level 9 allows me to have an extra unit. Here I found a legendary. If I didn't find a tide, I would have kept rolling. By finding a tide, I asked myself, what else could make me stronger? The only thing is a clockwork and maybe a beastmaster, but that won't make me much stronger. So I'm okay with sitting here. But if I lose again over here, I'll definitely be rolling very deep. You're rolling with the rest of my 27 gold. Because I know every 2 gold spent here is like 6 gold spent at level 8 rolling for techies. And yes, we did lose here. So now the plan in my head is to roll massively for techies. And I even sold the Tinker because I don't think I'll ever get a Tinker. I sold the Tinker for a spare gold change. And yes, fortunately enough, we did find techies in this particular game. And if we did not find techies, the plan is to roll very deep because we only have 26% of health left. And this is going to touch on to the next tip for us. In this particular tip, we're going to be looking at health as a resource for the Goblin player. What is health as a resource? It's that health is an important indicator for us. When should we be leveling, when should we be rolling for techies, and when we should make a really gamble for it for techies in the late game. First, in the early game, usually as a Goblin player, your HP pool is sitting pretty high simply because you're pretty self-sustained as a Goblin player. You tend to win the early game from round 4 to 15, and even afterwards you won't lose too much HP until round 18 or maybe round 21 and onwards. So what that means is usually our HP is equal to or greater than 75%, and usually at those stage we're okay. We're okay with keeping our win streak, we're okay with losing because we're saving up economy for the late game and mid game. But once our HP falls to close to 60%, we really do have to plan to level up. And notice I used to mention that leveling up at certain level intervals, say level 17, level 21, level 26, and level 31 is really important because this is when other people also become stronger. So when your HP is close to 60 or just below 60, you should be considering level up. And after that, when your HP is close to 45% or equal to 45%, you should really look at level up right now. Regardless what level it is, unless it's a neutral round, say 30, say 25, if it's any other round, say even 24, you shouldn't be waiting, you should be leveling up. Why is that? Because for Goblins, it actually takes 1 or 2 rounds to find a critical unit, and sometimes you need time to be rolling as well. You might not even have time to spend the entire 50 gold, so you want to be preparing, actually really be leveling up around HP at 45 or 40% mark. And after that, there's 2 more HP threshold over here for us. When you're at HP at 30 or just above or just below 30, this is the last, I think, indicator for us to be rolling. And here are the 2 crucial things I think about when I'm rolling or when I'm leveling. 2 choices. If I spend all my gold to level up, how much gold do I have left? Let's say it's going to cost me 30 gold to level up, and I still have 20 gold left. Then I will always level up before rolling, because this gives me higher chance or higher value for money. But if I spend all my money to level up and I won't have more than 20 gold, I won't be leveling up. I'll tend to roll on where I am. But this is the usual case for level 9. For level 8, I think you can look at 15 gold as a threshold. Cool. So what that means is I'm level 8. If I spend all my gold to level up, do I have more than 15 gold after leveling up? If I do, I will level up and I'll start rolling, because I know that 15 gold becomes 45 gold because it's enlarged 3 times because of the rate of finding techies. But if I level up and I don't have more than 15 gold at level 8, I might just roll all my gold in hope of finding techies or something else might change the fight for me. Say a Tide Hunter, say an Enigma, or maybe even a Gyrocopter. And the last HP indicator is when HP is just 10%, a little bit above 10, or a little bit below 10. This is when you really want to spin and you really want to roll it right now, because you will not have time to roll on the next round. You will not have time to do pretty much anything on the next round. So you really want to be rolling. And yeah, if you guys do have a great comeback, let me know. We'll clip it. We'll make a video on it. This is the last tip for our Goblin highlight today. The Goblin transitioning is quite important. Knowing that how weak we are in the mid game, we really want to transition and plan to transition into the mid game with Goblin, with some other units other than Goblins. And I have made a particular guide about how to transition in the mid game, but here let's touch on the Goblins specifically. There is one bounty hunter, which is one assassin. If we have another assassin that's great like Queen of Pain, then maybe we can look into having another assassin. Gives a little attack damage boost with critical rate, and also having 3 assassins means we have a chance of winning just outright with lucky RNG. That's one type of transitioning. Usually I tend to go with the second type of transitioning, which is to go with a demon. The preferred demons I will have is Queen of Pain, Terrorblade, and Shadowfiend. And if I can't get those demons, or if my secondary choices comes in, I'll take a Razer, I'll take a Beastmaster, I'll take a Conquer, and I'll take a Lone Druid. Preferably 2-star, but if I can't, I'll take them as 1-star. This is because Goblins really have a disadvantage in the mid game, and if you don't plan for your transition units around round 12, and if you don't plan for your transition units around round 12 to round 17 or 16, by the time you hit round 21, what you find is you're very much weaker than everybody else. There's LV evasions, warrior armor, and you just can't break them. So the last highlight for us for Goblins is plan your transition early and make sure you transition into something that's quite strong in the mid game. And if you're unsure of what is strong in the mid game, make sure you check out my mid game tier list for the strongest units in the mid game. So let's have a conclusion, guys. Goblins are great, and they're still very much relevant in the current meta with all the new strategies with Goblin gambling, with Goblin rolling. But there's one particular downside, is people are catching up on how strong Goblins are. Because when they catch up, what they're going to do is, they're going to deny techies actively. And when they do that, they're going to give us a hard time in the late game. They also give us a hard time in the early game when they start to gamble with Goblins, or they use Goblins to transition. So as any Goblin players out there, my advice is to have a particular plan with Goblins that works for you. Personally for me, is to save up and transition. I can transition to demons, I can transition to a lot of things. I'm not stuck myself on Goblins forever, but I allow myself to transition to other things. But on the off chance and on the lucky chance that techies do appear at level 8 or level 9, then of course I have my Goblin waiting on my bench, and all of a sudden I put my Goblins down, and all of a sudden I become the powerhouse for the late game. So thank you so much guys for watching, and if you want to support me further, please check out my Patreon page in the link below. And again, thank you so much guys for supporting me on Twitch, on YouTube, and everywhere else. Thank you so much guys for coming to say hi on Twitch as well. And yes, I really appreciate all the helps I received from you guys and all the encouragement comments. It has really motivated me, and I plan to make better guides and better content for you guys in the future. Thank you guys, and take care guys. I'll see you guys next time.